Well, welcome everybody to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we are so glad you're with us today with the one and only Mr. Terry White, who was the lead garage mechanic where the pit crew worked on the space shuttles. How you
Nice
doing, my
being here.
friend?
Nice being here today.
Nice being here. Yes, that's exactly what you guys were. Was kind of a pit crew.
That's right. That's
And
what I used to tell the guests. I said, yeah, the astronauts were the race car drivers and we were the pit crew.
well, we've always enjoyed Terry being here once a month on our Stay Curious program. He started coming on in July 2023 and learned a lot. And of course, we're going to be looking for your questions because we found our guests really enjoy taking questions from our very intelligent watchers out there on Stay
Yes,
Curious.
yes, they asked some very good questions.
Oh man, and I had one that I didn't print out, Marty, and I may go get that because Steve Jokums asked a very good question on the preview thing, and I may go off camera here and get that, Steve. So don't repeat that because I can get that in just a second when Terry's talking. But Terry, how are you? How's the winter treated you?
Doing good. Yeah, just not getting enough rain, but
Yeah, we haven't got enough rain here
No.
lately. It rained quite a bit there in early winter, but
yeah, my wife's orchard is suffering from lack of rain. So
and of course we've heard a lot of your wife Pat. What kind of
Yes.
orchard you have there?
she's got the dragon fruit.
Oh, dragon fruit.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, yeah,
You leave it out on the street out there for people to play.
And actually, she has a clientele that when she has ripe fruit, they show up from Orlando, from South Brevard, and that come over, and from the west coast of Florida, drive over to get her dragon fruit. So
Well, tell her to save me a couple then.
Will do.
In there, all
Yeah.
right? When you guys come by, drop me off a couple. What I was alluding to is around some of the areas on Merritt Island, particularly Island Road, you'll see people have their little stand up there and an honor system to take some fruit home with them.
Yep. A lot of the ones that sell the mangoes and that, it's an honor system.
I always thought that was kind of cool. Today, Terry's going to talk about STS-2 because, after all, you can't have a reusable spaceship if the second one doesn't come back well, and they did have a few problems with that, particularly the fuel cell that shortened the trip. But then, and then STS-3, Terry want to talk about, which is one of the shuttles of the month of March. I failed to put up our slide for that, getting this program together today. So also we want to take your questions from Terry, and everything's game right on
Yes.
there. So
Yes.
let me just take care of a little bit of business here that we want to I'm sorry. Okay. I don't even know how that one got in there. I didn't know that was in the queue. That's interesting. We have got Terry as a guest today. Tomorrow we've got Jean Wright, the shuttle seamstress, going to talk about her book, Sew Sisters. It is a beautifully illustrated book with a great message in it. You'll learn a lot about Jean, though it's a kid's book. You learn
Yes.
about Jean in there, and we're going to love talking to her tomorrow. And then Gary Studi, a friend of our museum for many years, is a space biologist and expert on food. And I always tell Gary's been on a couple times, and we're just going to talk about the reality that we need food.
Yes.
And humans need food. The caloric intake is known. These astronauts probably burn more calories in space, working all the time. But
No,
Terry,
the one who burns more is an infantry soldier.
is that right? Okay, were you one of those?
No,
No,
but
you
my
were-
son was.
Oh, your son, Travis.
Yeah.
Shout out to Travis out there. My point is, easy to get food to the moon in 3 days,
Yes.
but 9 months to Mars, not so easy.
Yeah. Where are you going to pack all that food?
Yes, and will it be good if you send it there a year and a half early?
Yeah.
You know, in a cargo ship. I mean, you can only eat potatoes so much, like the movie The Martian had
Yeah.
in there. If you have to, you will. But I think it's a big problem, Terry, that we're not addressing growing food in space.
Well,
It's
we
gonna be
are.
needed.
They're raising food on the International Space Station, but not enough to sustain a crew for months.
Right.
And basically, the trip to Mars, you're going to have to sustain them for 2 years to get there, spend some time understanding the place, and the trip home is even longer. So, you're going to have to come up with 2 years worth of food, other supplies that you need, toiletries,
Water, of
clothes,
course. yes,
everything. Yeah, water.
Everybody needs
Yeah.
4 or 5 gallons of water a day.
Yeah.
And just getting along with people. I think is another thing. You can even married couples have their little timeouts once in a
That's
while.
very difficult to do, that you get a crew of people that can stay that close together for that length of time. They have yet to come up with one.
Yeah.
that can
Are
do
you
it.
alluding to that the shuttle crews weren't as homogenous as we want to believe?
For the majority,
I mean,
they
not to
were, but
throw anyone under the
they were
bus.
only together for their training periods, which sometimes lasted as much as a year, and for their mission. But they weren't in the confinement that the people going to Mars are going to be in.
Right.
So yeah, and it's
The longest
it's
shuttle mission was how many days? How long could the orbiter?
18 days, yeah. So,
Okay.
but yeah, so even through the training time when they were together, that's when they tell me that they missed their real family the most, but they had a new family with the crew and that. But still, they were doing a lot of activity, interfacing with other people and that. They weren't in a room with just the 6 or 7 of them and no ability to get away from each other for any period of time. So,
Before we take a question, and we're grateful for, what are we looking at on our green screen here?
okay, we're looking at Columbia landing at White Sands for the landing of STS-3. It was slated, this was the 3rd flight, okay? So they weren't ready to land at Kennedy Space Center yet. They still had a lot more to understand about the vehicles, so they wanted to land them out in the deserts where they had miles and miles of flat, hard ground to land on instead of just a 15,000-foot concrete runway. But they were slated to land at Edwards, but because of the rain, Edwards was wet. So then they diverted to White Sands. Now, the astronauts were familiar with landing at White Sands because that's where they practice a lot of their training in the simulators for landing in that. But, had not landed an orbiter there. They had some issues putting it down there and that. But then we had problems with it because they didn't have all the facilities that they needed there to get the orbiter ready to put it on the 747 and bring it back. Plus, there was no place for the people to stay. Most of the people there that were working on the recovery of the orbiter had to stay 90 minutes away. So you go out there and work a 12-hour day, and you just had an hour and a half drive to get to work. And now you get off after 12 hours, you got an hour and a half drive to go back to the nearest hotel and restaurants and that. So it was a strain on the technicians and the people that were out there, recovering the orbiter. And then it's gypsum out there, which is about the texture of talcum powder. So it got everywhere. Inside the orbiter was full of all that super fine sand.
Till its end, right? You would find it.
Yes, yeah.
We'll talk about more of that as we get in detail with this mission. The wonderful book by Tom Jones that chronicles a personal story or two of every shuttle mission has Jack Lausema talking about STS-3, and I like this. Marty and I've met Jack many times with the events at the Grumman. You met him too. He's a familiar face around the Space Coast. An honor for him to sit in my chair over there, and I'm going to show you a picture of. But he's told this story many times that he made the call not to land at Kennedy Space Center.
Yes.
Because one of the things was it had alligators at both ends. was what he said. Yeah, he mentions that.
And we laugh about it, but we used to have to go and make sure there were no alligators on the runway.
He was worried about an alligator being on the runway,
Yeah.
and that was part of the problem that though it was long, a 15,000-foot hard surface runway at the Cape, because it required precision landing, seemed to me premature for the shuttle at the time to do that. So I suggested landing at White Sands.
And it did land long at White Sands. It landed longer than it was supposed to and rolled out a lot further.
Came in a little hot. There's a story about that on there. Marty asked the question. I'm going to go over here and print out my notes while Terry answers that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we've got a question from Doug Forrest. Actually, he says, I have 3 questions for Terry from some friends. Did the shuttle use hydraulics on any of its systems?
Yes, it had an extensive hydraulic system. Its landing gear was operated by hydraulics. Its aero surfaces, like the elevons, rudder speed brake and that, were operated by hydraulics. Like I said, its landing gear doors operated by hydraulics. So there was a lot of things on the orbiter that operated with hydraulics.
And were there heating considerations?
Heating up worried about the hydraulic fluid getting too warm to perform properly. No, there wasn't an issue with that. So
Good. Well, let's do a couple other business kind of things here. I got your note there from the Lake County Spaceport up there, thawing out on Lake Michigan. Steve
Okay.
Jokums has got a good question there. Dave Stange, one of our gold members here, he asked about, got another picture of the Sow sister here in Gene's book. Dave Stange asked, will Gene set a new record with the most views with this new episode? And Gene is our record holder, proudly. I forget, 10,000 views or something she had on one of her programs, which was an in-depth history of her that you can see on Facebook. This lady cut some of the fabric of the Wright Flyer that was taken at the Armstrong, that was taken to the moon by Apollo 11.
Okay.
And that kind of stuff. So she had a great 8-year career in the shuttle era, working as a seamstress in the sew shop there, right? The thermal
And
protection.
she also worked for me in the orbiter processing facility.
There you go. Got any stories that we need to?
Well, some of my best seamstresses were guys, but there was a lot of hand sewing on the orbiter, especially on the thermal barriers around the landing gear doors and that. But we used large triangular, they're curved, but they're triangular shaped needle, sewing needles and that, but you actually had to use vice grips to turn them through the fabric sometimes. But the
Wow.
guys' hands were getting all tired of that. So I went over and asked their manager, I said, hey, any of your people over here, they're certified to come work on it, but if they want to come over and do some of the hand sewing on the orbiter, I'd be glad to give my guys a break, and I'll pay your technicians to work over in there. And she was one of the ones that came over and said, oh yeah, I'd like to do that. So
Well, Jean's a good one. We love her. She does a lot of great outreach and is a big influencer in the space community, particularly on Space Hipsters and the Space Shuttle. I lived it Facebook page there. We also want to give an early heads up. We've got a new friend, Chachi. Mike Canali is the director of the, now wait for this acronym mouthful, Apollo Challenger Columbia Lessons Learned program.
okay, yeah,
Which,
I
of
know,
course,
I know
is a-
Mike. Yeah, as soon as I see his face, yeah, we work together.
Which,
so.
of course, is an important program. He was a test conductor on the shuttle and a landing recovery director, which talked to Dean Schaff, our GOM over on the TAL sites, ground operation manager. He said Mike was in the launch control there, just praying they didn't have to do that return to launch site maneuver.
Yeah.
Because that was the one that nobody wanted to do, the RTLS, right? Which John Young said that requires a bunch of Hail Marys followed by several miracles for it to be pulled off. But
Yeah, some of the structures engineers told me that turn they needed them to do, they didn't think the wings would survive the turn.
wow, interesting there. You heard it from Terry there. Question, Marty.
Question from Clyde Lewis. I was wondering why the shuttle profile, when on the runway, is a little nose down. Was this an aerodynamic concern or more to do with how much space there was within the body of the shuttle?
Your second part is more correct. Yeah, so if you look at the Russian one, theirs has a lot longer nose landing gear strut system, and that the orbiter does not. So it sits at the nose down position when it's on the runway because it has such a short strut.
That was always one of the final hairy moments, wasn't it? To see that front end just come down smoothly, that the two rear wheels could touch pretty beautifully. But
Yeah,
I remember
but
watching
they
a couple
absorb-
of them. You're going, come down, come down.
they absorb most of the weight with the 4 main landing gear tires, on the 2 mains. And so they were slowing down significantly when the nose actually touched down.
All right, grab a shuttle there if I need it. All right, couple other things we want to tell you is going on. Well, Mike's going to be on next Wednesday. Looking very forward to this gentleman. Will be in the queue once a month or sort of frequently. As I told him, you've got a forum to talk about this important program of learning things so they're never repeated, right,
Yes.
Terry?
Yep.
So you're going to enjoy Chachi Canali, and thank you, Mike Leinbach and Mr. John Tribe for talking to this gentleman and giving Marty and I the thumbs up that we were okay for him to be on the show. If you're here, that's good too. There's Mike there. I said he looked too young to do all this stuff he did, and I go, wait a minute, this picture's 12 years old.
Yeah.
So he must have some gray hair by now. So
Or
3,
if not,
2, 1.
only his hairdresser knows.
That's there you go. 3-2-1 day. We're going to celebrate Ozzy Osband, who was the rocket hobo at Spaceview Park. This has really gained some momentum. Next Thursday, on March 21st, we've got a proclamation by the mayor, food trucks, rock and roll band, going to play right just across the street here from us at the Titusville Welcome Center. And thank you, the National Space Society, particularly Gabriel Rothblatt and Jennifer Muntz, for taking the bull by the horns to celebrate this eclectic, wonderful guy.
Yep.
And you had some doings with Ozzy.
Yeah, after the shuttle program ended, it was a half a dozen of us got together and realized that the people had no job searching skills. They didn't know how to write resumes. They didn't know how to do job interviews. They'd been working out the Space Center for 20 years or longer, and they just had, and all that time, never applied for a job. So we created a nonprofit company to go help these people and teach them how to do all these things. And Ozzy came along to help us. He operated the computers and that for all the slideshows and things we did. But we brought in company officials. We brought in former directors of HR and that to teach people what to do. We had guest speakers like Congressman Posey and Sheriff Ivey and that come in and give them hints about what they had to do. But Ozzy was a lot of great help in that, and helping people with some of their computer skills and the things that we're stumbling with on trying to get their resumes together. But in the end, the Space Coast Technical Network assisted 500 people in finding jobs.
That was awesome. Just another thing that Terry did to promote the shuttle era and then get the workers' jobs out there. We want to thank Rock Paper Simple, a local company, for doing some of the, doing these posters here. Just an amazing piece of artwork. It looks like that could be the cover of a Janis Joplin Big Brother and the Holding Company album or something.
And if people don't know it, Ozzy was a big ham radio operator.
Yeah.
So he, over the radio, he broadcasted all of the launches.
I just love a picture of him walking around with a Tandy computer strapped, I understood, to his chest, and he had a power pack and antenna walking around a Radio Shack promoting that. He was one of those guys, and I always say this, 3 decades he was out to Spaceview Park. Ozzy was doing a countdown, and if you were from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and this was the only launch that you were probably ever going to see in your life, you would remember that launch, and then the next thing you're going to remember is this white-haired guy out there that was doing the countdown, and Ozzy out there, and then he'd get the rocket off, and he'd grab that coffee can tip jar and stand out there.
He was willing to answer any question he was asked about the launches.
Very smart guy, and we miss him. He died at age 72 in August of natural causes, and we are honored that we can do this for him. Like I said to Marty, I said, my gosh, can you imagine, any of us dying and someone makes this piece of artwork about you? Because he was the father of the 321 area code.
He's the one who realized when we were getting a new area code and 321 wasn't being used, and he proposed to the state that they put 321 for the area code here.
He said it was one of the few times he wore a full suit to do anything when he was in front of the FCC talking about that. So hope you can enjoy us. We intend to do a 4 o'clock Stay Curious live from over there, if we can get some technical things ironed out to do it. So, but we should be able to do that. There's Ozzy, great guy. He's got his Yuri's Night on there, on the phone there in our launch consoles. And thank you, Rock Paper Simple. And we want to thank this guy, Mr. Chris Calais. Chris Calais, of course, lives in Connecticut area. This is his tribute, Marty, to 55 years ago, double nickel. Apollo 9 landed after a successful 10-day mission to test the Grumman lunar module tail number 3. And this was described by Sam Phillips, the manager of the Apollo program, as the cleanest flight ever flown. To the point, it was cleaner than any manned flight since then, and it ended up being the most perfect flight of the Apollo program.
Good deal.
On there, Marty. Comment or question?
Both. First, a comment from Gene Wright. She said, I had 5.4K views, not 10,000, but thanks for the compliment.
Well, right, Gene. Well,
Hello, Gene.
Yes, glad that you're staying curious today with us. We look forward to tomorrow for sure. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Mark Usiak.
Uh-huh.
Would Columbia have survived its final re-entry if the wings would have been made of titanium or stainless steel like the SpaceX Starship?
Actually, no, by what I understand, because it broke through the reinforced carbon. The only thing that will take that leading edge heat, even the titanium, and that doesn't take that amount of heat for that time. And since it broke through there, I mean, it did then burn through the aluminum structure behind the reinforced carbon. But I don't know if the titanium, and definitely not the stainless, would have withstood that 3,000 degree temperature for the length of time that it did.
And this is Mark's photo here. We're going to feature a couple photos of Mark. Was out there on a very cold morning at White Sands, and he'll never forget that. And thank you, Chris Callie, for your beautiful artwork there. We look forward to sharing more of that along the way. That's just another beautiful look at that of his mixed media montage there that he does so well. And a lot of these montages of Apollo, Chris is honoring President Kennedy's great speech, of course, that we're going to go to the moon. So a University of Michigan graduate who's he's doing okay. All right, Chris actually has about more than 36 postage stamps to his name.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he and his father, the great Paul Callie, that did the Apollo 11 stamp, and others. They have a lot of U.S. postage stamps. And one final thing from our friends at the National Space Society, there's a space forum on Thursday. Bert Dick is going to be the host of that. These are great to watch. You can find them on YouTube. Lori Forzek is going to be the talk about Astrolytics, a company she founded, mother of 5, and has she's an influencer in the space community. So you can check her out Thursday from 9 to 10, navigating the Florida Space Coast rocket landscape. Certainly something that I want to make sure I watch Thursday. So thank you for our partners there at the National Space Forum with Aussie Day, and also going to help us out with the Shuttle Fest. And speaking of Shuttle Fest, I didn't put a slide up there, but I wanted to show you our poster there by way of, we've got astronaut John David Bartow, who was an important fixture of the Astro 1 and 2, will be one of our featured guest speakers on the panel on the Astro 1 and 2 missions. So thank you, J.D. Bartow, and we are sure that a couple other astronauts will want to attend, and we hope as Shuttle Fest 3 becomes Shuttle Fest more Roman numerals, that astronauts will feel left out, Terry, if they're not here at it. Tell people about, you were a guest at our Shuttle Fest on a panel with Gene, actually, at Shuttle Fest 1. Tell people what your impression was of it.
It's a great event. You come there, you listen to a lot of different speakers, different topics about the space program and that, and you get to ask them questions and that, and meet with the people that come in. And, you know, like I say, that last year we had astronauts that were planned to be there, but we had 2 or 3 other astronauts that just showed up out of the blue that didn't even sign up to be there. They
Nicole
just came
Stott
to it.
and Troy Musgrave were going to Yuri's Night, which there's no Yuri's Night this year on the coast because their big eclipse event, they're hosting a party in Austin, Texas. But what I love about Shuttle Fest and what is my motivation for it to be a success is because of you, the shuttle space workers, doing something that will never ever be done again, in my opinion. All right. But what you did was change our world in the 21st century, and I hope it becomes a family reunion of sorts for you guys
that
and
would be
ladies
nice,
on there. As everybody gets older, we have a beautiful rocket reunion in November, where a lot of the workers come to the Moose Lodge here and have a few drinks and exchange a bunch of fun stories.
Eat beans.
Eat some
launch beans.
Eat launch beans. Norm Carlson's launch beans are always represented there and so forth. So Shuttle Fest 3, Hyatt Place Hotel has some special rates. I know Dave Stange's there. We're going to feature the artwork of Chris Callie. Tommy Usiak is going to take his brother's place to talk about art, photography as art. Tim Gagnon, bless your heart, designed this patch without even asking. After Shuttle Fest 2, he sent me this and said, Mark, what do you think? And I said, Tim, I think we just found our I call it the shield for our branding, our Shuttle Fest program there. So once again, J.D. Bartow's going to be there. We're going to talk about the Ulysses and the Galileo missions. So there's other astronauts that we're asking, and we are a nonprofit, and this is a fundraiser, so our checkbook's not open to bring them here. So we hope that they'll take my offer if I'll buy them just a bottle of beer, and they'll show up. I might get Bruce Melnick over here, and maybe Mike McCulley. We'll see.
You'll struggle with Bruce. This is turkey season, and he's a big turkey hunter.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Well, that'll be April. Okay.
Well,
Melnick's
turkey season runs till toward the end of April.
He's a nice one for sure, and he supported our last. He was at the one of our Shuttle Fests also. So, well, let's get here into these missions a little bit. Marty, you got any more questions to lay on us there? Anything?
Not yet.
Okay. Let me ask you. Well, we're looking at the beautiful bird there, Columbia, an aerial view. I'd say that's probably off of the building, huh?
Yes.
We didn't have drones back in those days.
No.
Probably on top of one of the
did have
roofs.
helicopters that fly over, but yeah, so yeah, that and that could be. I was thinking that could be one of the ones from the Constellation umbilical tower, but it's not. So yeah.
Well, there are two distinct ways to spot this orbiter above all the other four orbiters. One is pretty obvious and one's not so obvious. I'm going to have Terry tell you both of them as Marty gets his arrow handy there to show you.
If you're looking at this and you compare it to any of the other orbiters, you will notice the top of the wings or about halfway back is black. All the other orbiters are white because just prior to leaving the orbiter processing facility on STS-1, they came down and they said, we want you to paint the top of the wings black because we're worried about the temperature differential when it's re-entering the atmosphere, it being cold to exposed to space. So we're going to paint it black so it will absorb heat just prior to re-entry. So Columbia is the only one that had the black on the wings.
Marty, can you point that out?
Yeah.
The black on the wings there.
That
Was that Sherwin-Williams paint or what?
No, it's VHT paint. Very high temperature.
Okay, all right.
So then once we put it on there, we had to maintain it. So we painted the tiles and the felt reusable surface insulation.
Well, that is a very distinctive mark when you see the orbiter on the pad.
Yes.
And if you can't read the wing or anything, that is one that you've taught me to go to that first and find out.
And then the other thing,
sort of like a starling or something bird, it's got little extra color under there.
And then the other thing is looking at the top of the vertical stabilizer, the tail of the orbiter, that it's the only one that had a silts pod. It was a special instrumentation pod that looked down on the left wing, and so it went on after STS-9, and then it was deactivated later on. So people asked, well, why didn't you use that when Columbia was in trouble? Because it had been deactivated. We just hadn't had the opportunity to take it off because we had to remove the entire top of the vertical and put back on the original vertical piece.
Mm-hmm. It had infrared sensors and things like that for heat. And
it was evaluating the temperatures of the wing.
Two easy ways to spot Columbia among all the other orbiters up there. All right, let's get to this beautiful STS-2. I'm going to read what the late Admiral Truly said. All the hype about the shuttle was it was reusable, but NASA hadn't proven it until we flew. And I think that history will show that the first reusable flight sent us on our way. And that's Dick Truly in the Tom Jones book. Again, I left my notes over there, Marty, on that peach looking. I want to get everybody's ages right. The Post-it note, the pink Post-it note.
Post-it note, yeah.
No, the other one.
The pink ones.
Oh, in there, yeah. So Columbia, very simple. Ingle and Truly, these were, thank you, Marty, approach and landing test pilots that flew Enterprise. So they knew how to land it.
Yes.
And also with the Crew 3 we're going to talk about, they were experienced on the approach and landing test, so they knew how to land it also, and that helped
Especially
them out a
at
lot.
White Sands, because they used to practice a lot at White Sands.
You got the 2 stars there for the 2 astronauts and the big, bold American symbols there. Steve Jokums asked this question, Terry. During the pre-flight processing of STS-2, there was a hydrazine spill onto the forward section of Columbia, which caused failure of the TPS bonding agent, the thermal protection system bonding agent. Was the spill area dealt with by the escape-equipped hypergol techs first, before techs were allowed to get access to that area?
Okay. Well, it wasn't the fuel; it was the oxidizer, the nitrogen tetroxide, and a quick disconnect had failed, and it caused a spill onto the side of the forward. And it didn't affect the bond of the tiles, and it didn't harm the tiles, but it actually turned the corrosion paint underneath the tiles back to a liquid. So the tiles were no longer adhering to the ship.
Ooh.
Okay. And initially when it happened, yes, the people in SCAPE rinsed it down and that. But then after they gave the clear for us to go in and evaluate what happened, we had to go in and take the tiles off that were contaminated in that. So there were only a few people that were certified to actually handle the tiles that had hardline breathing, which means you have a mask on and you're supplied air from out of the area through a hardline. So at any rate, so myself and 2 technicians climbed up on the forward, and standing out there on a pickboard at 207 feet up in the air, we started lifting these tiles off that were contaminated. We actually had oxidizer running down our arms.
Ooh.
At the time. It had been diluted, but picking these tiles off, but actually holding our arms on the other tiles to stop them from sliding off. We were lucky because we'd take one off and the next one would slide, and that because they were no longer sticking to the aluminum structure.
Now, what's a pickboard?
A pickboard is a temporary platform that we have guys that are experts at installing these, and they put them in with ropes, and you walk out on this wooden board that is like a gangplank that's hanging out there, and that's what you go on to work on. And that was the days when we didn't wear fall protection.
I was just going to say, in 1991, I'll bet you didn't have a protection harness.
This was STS-2, so this was 1982.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're
81 first launch.
So
It's November 81.
Yeah. So we're getting all these tiles off. So we wound up removing 384 tiles and never dropped a one of them. But we had to take them off and put them in bags and then hand them to other people. And then we had to go heat clean them. It didn't hurt the tiles, but we had to get everything else off of the tiles. So we ruined all the ovens at Kennedy Space Center and all the ovens at Patrick Air Force Base cleaning the tiles so that we could reuse them and put them back on. And we put almost all of the same tiles back.
What did these ovens look like? A pizza
I don't
oven
know.
down
I didn't do. I was working
Zorella's,
on,
or did it look like our kitchen?
I don't know. I was working on the orbiter. I wasn't down there running the ovens. That was their job. But yeah, so sadly enough, when it came the end of our shift at 12:42 at night, when the third shift came on, they didn't have anybody certified for hardline breathing, so we had to stay up there. First shift came in the morning, and they didn't have anybody to relieve us, so they had a special training class set up to train people on hardline breathing. So about 10 o'clock the next morning, we finally got relief from up there, but the 3 of us had to stay up on the pickboards all night holding all that together. So
no overtime either, huh?
well, the techs got overtime.
Oh,
I was
okay.
a supervisor.
Well, it just shows you had to do what everybody else did there, and that is a thread that goes through the entire space program, I think.
Yeah,
From Mercury to now is we do what it takes to get the job done.
Yeah, but they said it would take a long time for us to get all that done, the work done, put it all back together, evaluate everything in that. But they gave us a lot of support. So normally if a technician worked for me, was doing a job up there, we would have to come down off the stack and go down to logistics to get something or transport the tile somewhere else. And that we had a waiting line of people to support us. You know, that they had just said, whatever you need, we will do. They even took a crane room up there and air conditioned it so I could have an office, not only me, but the other supervisor working with me. So we could have an office up there to work at the top of the pad. So we're doing that. But they said it would take a long time to get it done. 3 weeks later, we climbed down off the stack and said, we're done. You can go fly now.
Sweet. Good stuff there. We're talking to Terry White, who worked on the shuttle program, as you see, 1978 to the end of the program. It became a go-to person to talk to dignitaries all over the world about this shuttle program. And then because of your knowledge, you become a very key person in the recovery of this beautiful spacecraft, Columbia, that we're talking about today. It's second and third missions. Marty, you have a question?
Question from Tom Usiak. How close did they come to rolling back to the to do the repairs?
That was a lot higher than my level, and they evaluated in that. But in those days, there was a lot of things that they didn't really understand. Later in the program, it was next to impossible to bond a tile outside of the OPF because of the issues with making sure the tiles adhere. But back then they said, well, we'll pull all the stops and do what we can do, put it all back on. We bonded other tiles out at the pad for STS-1 and STS-2. So I just finished repairing the elevons down below, and had finally got a couple of 8-hour shifts when we had the spill. So yeah, STS-2 was a very long flow.
To talk about that delay there, Steve Jokums, very timely that you mentioned that, because it's written in the book by Tom Jones. Truly, let's look at a picture of these wonderful astronauts here while we talk about that. There's the launch there. Of course, STS-2 had the white tank, all right, without the ring at the top there. STS-1 has a ring on it. There is Joe Engle on the left, an X-15 pilot. He flew 3 X-15 missions, then was selected an astronaut. Then Richard Truly was selected as an astronaut in 1965 for the Manned Orbiting Laboratory Program. So when he finally flew in 1981, wow, 18 years later, he says in Tom Jones's book, I had waited a long time to fly STS-2, so it was a thrill. I think that's an understatement. The flight was scheduled 3 or 4 weeks earlier, but on the launch pad, we had a leak in the forward RCS that washed off some of the tile surface coatings. The delay just happened to schedule the launch for my 44th birthday. It was great. And that would have been November 12th, 1981. And Truly died just last month, February 27th, at age 86, reportedly at his home in, I think it was in Colorado. But they were only up for 4 or 5 hours, and then one of the 3 fuel cells had a problem. So they cut the mission about in half, and he says that though we hurried up, we got through everything done, the whole checklist beautifully. Joe Engle was, they were of course bonded as friends of flying Enterprise together during the alt tests.
So they wound up doing 5 days worth of work in 2.5 days.
Yeah, and so each of them was rewarded with another flight as a commander. Let's have another note about Engle. He was the 51I commander in 1985, and something interesting about Truly is here we see Admiral Truly in space, 1981. No internet, gang. Okay, they're sending up a teletype printer, right?
Yes.
To tell us. I mean, this is one of the infamous photos of the space age, of course.
We didn't have any computers on the floor at the time. So.
All right. So this was just basically a dot matrix printer on the shuttle, huh? What would he be looking at?
I don't know.
Just for instance, okay. Truly became the NASA administrator, And there he is. We have his handprints in our American Space Museum. We're very proud of that. That we have over 30 astronaut handprints in Spaceview Park, some of them here in our museum. The only place in the world you can put your hands on this gentleman's. There he is, a light moment at one of his many speaking engagements. You all know the photograph that Voyager 1 took when it got out past Pluto and it looked over its shoulder, so to speak, and took a series of pictures that were strung together that become the last look at our solar system. And the pale blue dot was the Earth there. Carl Sagan, the great astronomer from Cornell, he championed that, all right? But he said that he never would have got it done without Admiral Truly, as NASA administrator, intervening and saying, yes, we're going to have Voyager take those photographs. And so he plays a role in that picture. The first time we saw the Earth from 1 billion miles away, or 2 billion miles away, I think it was, and we just looked like a pale blue dot out there in the cosmos. So
pinhead in a football field.
That's right, pinhead in a football field. This is Joe Ingles' handprints that I've taken to many events. He was, at the time, for decades, the only human being to fly 2 reusable space planes, the X-15 and the shuttle. And there he is. Joe is 91 years old. Okay, don't know much else about him. He's is 91 right? 90, yeah, he's 91, and sure we'd love to meet him. All right, so that's our STS-1 mission, or 2 mission there. Anything else you want to say about it? Then we'll get into 3 here, landing at White Sands. But you don't have a reusable spaceship until it gets reused.
Yeah.
How reused was it when you guys processed it for the 3rd time?
Well, it wasn't as much initial work after the flight of STS-2. I mean, STS-1, we had a lot of lessons to learn, a lot of things to do in that. STS-2, after that one, we still had more things to do, but then it's like we had the spill on the forward. We also damaged Elevon just prior to rolling out of the orbiter processing facility, and we got the structure work done in the orbiter processing facility, but we did not get all the tile replaced. So when it was over in the vehicle assembly building, they said, well, we need you to go down and put the Elevon back together. I said, no, I worked the forward. They said, no, you're going to go down and do the Elevon. And I said, yeah, but I'm not going to do it with those techs. Not that I didn't trust them, but I didn't know them as well. I said, I'm taking my own technicians down there. No, you're not. So the next day I showed up down there with my technicians, and we put the Elevons back together. But we were bonding in the VAB off of 7 tiers of scaffolding to get up to the Elevon from the top of the mobile launch platform. And then we finished putting tiles on out at the launch pad on the Elevons, out in the weather and that. So then when we got it all done, yeah.
Well, I wanted to clear up that wasn't an adversarial type of situation in management. The who you're talking to at the VAB have their own criteria and idea of things, right?
Yeah.
So who minces that out? Do you go to the
I don't
center
know.
director?
My boss came. No, we who worked on the orbiter and the orbiter processing facility worked on the orbiter in the VAB and worked on the orbiter at the pad. So, it didn't matter where it was. We did the work on it. So, yeah, just because we're in the VAB, there were people that owned the building. There were people in there that worked on tanks and boosters, but those people didn't work on the orbiter. That was our job.
And vice versa. They wouldn't want your people working on those tanks and boosters,
You're right,
probably.
You're right. Yeah, we used to have a few arguments between the booster folks. Not too much with the tanks because I knew some of their management, but, so.
Well, how often were those arguments settled at the King's Duck Inn?
Rarely.
Well, rarely. There's a local watering hole here that is now closed for those of you that lived on the Space Coast. Well, let's go to the 3rd flight. Again, we want a reusable spaceship. It had 4 test flights. This was the 3rd one with the man, Jack Lausma, 88 years old, still just giving it all to talk to groups and so forth. And Gordon Fullerton. And Gordo passed away at age 76 in 2013. And he also was a approach and landing test astronaut, and very familiar with the, landing it out there. So he was the right guy to be beside Lausma, and a very iconic patch again there. And they took the remote manipulator arm up there, and put it through its paces. And there's the beautiful launch of that. And I wanted to see what Jack Lausma said in Shuttle Stories, Tom Jones's beautiful book. He said that STS-3 will probably be remembered most by space historians for being the only space shuttle mission to land at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. But he wants it to be known for that we accomplished 98% of our objectives, tripled the shuttle flight duration from just over 2 days to 8 days. All right, big jump. And in a single mission, set the pace for working in space with 15 experiments, some in the cockpit and some outside. And, like we said, Lausma made the decision. There's Jack in the foreground with Gordo Fullerton in the back. He made the decision not to land. They had weather at Edwards Air Force Base, was just a mess with water, I guess. And it had been raining at White Sands too. They were worried about that there. So they put her on autopilot for a test of the automatic final approach to the lake bed, requiring a manual takeover for landing once we were stabilized. And they came in a little hot, and at 275 miles an hour, and Gordo told him what the speed was, and Jack said, "Put him down," which was the pilot's job, was to press the button to put the landing gear down.
Lower the landing gear to help create a little more drag to attempt to slow it down before they touch down.
It appeared we were targeted for about halfway down the runway. In order to get the runway sooner, we began decelerating. Our touchdown was faster and not as smooth as I'd trained for, but all the landing parameters were within the structural limits of the vehicle. And
they did it without breaking anything.
He said, as we rolled to a stop on the lake bed, a wave of gratitude to God and a professional reward like no other swept over me. We were still alive, we had accomplished all our planned objectives, and we had presented our whole team with the successful outcome for which so many had worked so hard for so long. It doesn't get any better than that, said Jack Lausma. So,
and as well as accomplishing all the experiments and the tasks they had in space, they had tasks to accomplish to evaluate its landing thing, because it was always designed to be landed by astronauts and not strictly by computer and that. And they kind of proved that at the end when they turned it over to computer land, it was bringing them in too hot.
Look at a couple great pictures from Mark Usiak, just a teenager when he was out there in 1981 getting this land, or this has been 82, if I shuttle scroll correctly. Of course, I said it was one of those missions of March 22nd, the launch, and it landed on the 30th. Okay, and it had some, had some other experiments in there, but here's coming in. What a great shot Mark Usiak has there, the touchdown.
You see it really kicking up the gypsum
dust. Boy, it did, and even, I mean, you would just be in the OPF and maybe open a compartment or something and there'd be sand.
Yeah, and then that much sand kicking up by the mains was peppering the tiles back there. Did a lot of tile damage. So,
and there's Mark. He said it was a very cold day there, and it was quite a thrill of his lifetime to go out there as a young space photojournalist.
Look at his feet. That's not snow.
No, that's not snow. That's pretty cool there. There's our screen grab shot there with the T-38. That could be John Young. That could be Bob Crippen.
Yeah, STS-3. It's hard to say who it was.
But my point is, it was always an astronaut that was close to the vehicle.
Chase. Yes.
That would be talking on radio as they're coming in. These guys were talking to each other all the way down
Which
there.
they did as fighter pilots. You'd always check out your wingman and that.
So the mess of landing was all of its own, but how about the mess of getting this orbiter on a 747 and flying it back.
Without a mate-to-mate device,
Yeah.
like we had here and like we had at White Sands, so that was a special device that would pick the orbiter up, put the 747 underneath it, lower the orbiter down, attach it to the top of the 747. So out at White Sands, they had to use a system of cranes to pick up the huge sling to pick that vehicle up so they could get the 747 underneath it.
Well, as I've read, there was a dozen or more railroad cars full of equipment that
Yes.
was sent out there.
Yes.
They couldn't fly them in, but they sent a convoy of rail cars
Yes.
to bring all this equipment out there. And there's another shot of it being put on the 747 out there. How much does that weigh? 20 tons?
What? It weighs
20
200,000 pounds is what the orbiter weighs.
Okay.
Its flight weight was normally
So
170.
that's 100 tons.
Yeah,
100 tons.
179 to 200,000 pounds with, and that's not counting the payload. So
What an engineering feat for pulleys and all kinds of technology
Yeah.
there. Just
Yep.
Amazing. But
and you can see the tail cones on there covering the engines.
right
so.
in there. So quite a scene. The only time it's ever been repeated out there. Okay. And we're glad that Doug Forrest is watching from Los Angeles, the home of Endeavor out there. You've got a buddy you said is working on Endeavor.
Yeah, well, he's back now.
He's
Yeah.
back now. Well, let's go make a road trip out there one day. All right.
We can do that.
Well, I'd be happy to stop in and get some of your daughter's gumbo, Rebecca's gumbo, on the way out there on I-10 in Louisiana. Gary Gerald, I've been teasing him. He's getting the Vidalias ready for us there,
Okay.
buddy. I love those. Steve Jokums, thank you. Mark Usiak and Tommy have been watching. Ken Kramer watching today. Appreciate that, Ken. Appreciate your photographs that you sent me. Sent me a bunch of photographs we'll show tomorrow. As Gene Wright's also watching. Clyde Lewis, we appreciate you staying curious with us. Bill Whiting, good that you're on board. And Peggy Holbert
That's my sister.
is your
Lives in
sister.
Wendover.
All right. And Neil 1030. And glad that Neil's watching there, and appreciate him fact checking me, keeping me straight all the time there. So we're going to go out with this program with a couple family photo album shots here. There's Mr. Gordon Fullerton signing a bobblehead doll of his likeness there for some young guy. Never got to meet Mr. Fullerton, okay? But I sure did meet his wife there, Marie, there's Chris Callie. And Marie Fullerton is just what a wonderful lady she is. She is the quintessential astronaut's wife. This is at the Scholarship Foundation. I'm looking forward to seeing you again this year, Marie. She's just so enthralled with her husband's career. When she talks about him, the love is in her eyes for this man, and she stood beside him through all of his astronaut career, which was quite a long one. He was one of the early astronauts involved. I don't think he was a mole astronaut, but he was considered in there. But so look, that's Marie Fullerton there. I believe she lives out in Arizona. And Chris Callie there with his sheepish grin on there, which features his Apollo 9 artwork. Then there's a photograph I took of Jack Lausma, just a really distinguished gentleman. His mind of talking about his space career is just so lucid. He wants to share with you everything about it. Marty's had him several times at his Grumman reunions over the last decades, as he was of course, Capcom for Apollo 13. Getting the word from Jim Lovell that Houston, we've had a problem, and he was like, "What do you say? Repeat that." And but a great guy, and there's Mark Usiak and myself, a picture that I think Carlton Bailey took. One of my favorites of me talking to an astronaut. Just a great guy, University of Michigan, just like Callie there. So when I picked him up to go to dinner, I had my scarlet and gray Ohio State blanket on the seat. And he opened the door. He goes, "What's this all about?" And I said, "I want to put some color in your life, Jack." And he said, "That's the wrong color." And growing up in Findlay, Ohio, I know all about Ann Arbor. up there. So we wish him well. He just turned a leap day baby, born
Okay.
February 29th, so he just turned 22 years old.
Yeah.
Times 4. And I'll cherish this photo. He's sitting in my chair here in our studio as we pulled him on for a brief interview on Stay Curious when he was here with Rusty Schweikert signing some CDs on that great Skylab DVD on there. So, and we thought we'd end here with a beautiful photograph and visually with this beautiful photograph by Mark Usiak of Columbia. And in the twilight on going out to the crawler, you were probably walking around there somewhere maybe.
Yeah.
Did you usually do that?
No, I
Enjoy it?
usually didn't walk it out. I was there for when it would roll out, but I wasn't going to take the long walk out to the pad, even though you could get on it and ride it out. But yeah.
And there you can see instantly the black painting on the
On the
four
upper
wings
wings,
there that distinguishes it from all the other four orbiters. So,
And before we sign off,
Yeah,
we
why
got
don't
one more minute. People are constantly asking about what are some of the benefits from going to space.
Mhm.
So I jogged a few of them down, and one of them is the electrolyte concentrates that they develop for the crew assist athletes to combat dehydration and boost performance. So the NASA came up with that.
so
And they-
Gatorade kind of got
well, not Gatorades, but actually higher electrolytes
Okay.
than Gatorades and that. But clothing to protect against ultraviolet rays. So they've produced that for the astronauts. That's been spin-offs into the clothing industry that you and I can get, and sensors to provide early warning of biological threats. They actually develop some sensors that can let you know when there's the potential for biological releases around you and that. One thing is for our military and for our police, law enforcement, that is robotics to assist them in detecting IEDs. You know, we've seen it a bunch. You know,
IEDs and
interim explosive devices.
Okay.
You know, hidden bombs and that. So we've seen that in the pictures from Afghanistan and Iraq and that. And also the robotics can use them to locate people when building collapses and that. The robots can get to places faster than the crews can and that. You know, dogs can sense out some of that stuff, but yeah, also textiles were developed to protect payloads, and that textiles have also been used now for metal flex armored vests. And they're actually more comfortable than the rigid vests. And then the insulating foam that they developed for the cryo tanks may be used on watercraft, aircraft, spacecraft, electronics and electrical products, automobiles, recreational equipment, building materials, and that. So the things they use to protect some of the tanks inside the orbiter is now spin-off for uses of all kinds of other products. And those are just a few of the things. But NASA publishes a book, spin-offs and that, and there's some excellent things in there. They have all different kind of categories and that, and you know, so it's interesting if you can just Google spin-offs and see what some of the different things that have developed in that. So,
well, and like we all like to say, we've never stuffed a rocket full of $100 bills and shot it to space.
that's right.
All the money's been spent right here on Earth on well-paid jobs and education
And the
families.
materials to construct the equipment
Yeah.
and the space vehicles. So yes,
Yeah, well,
the only money that goes to space, as I tell people, is if an astronaut takes a stack of dollar bills to hand out as souvenirs.
there you go.
Yeah, one of them took a roll of dimes one time, and that was a mistake.
That was
You were finding
Gus
dimes.
Grissom.
Yeah,
Gus Grissom took mercury dimes,
Yes.
several rolls of him with
Yep.
them in there. That's a big exhibit. It's a cosmosphere where they display those when they got the capsule off the ocean floor. Marty, we have any other questions or comments from our Stay Curious watchers today? Well, Terry, we are really experiencing a good increase in the viewership of Stay Curious, and we thank you all out there for that. We feel like we are doing content that nobody else is in the space community, a la Terry White being here once a month to give his expertise on the intelligent questions that you are all asking there. So
and
please
all
tell
the
your
questions Mark asked before we get on camera.
yeah, right. Exactly. So you could look them up, right, in there. No, you're a wealth of knowledge, and we just love you how you've connected with our museum and brought us some good people and involved with our Shuttle Fest. And, it's just a wonderful situation for our nonprofit, because we do, like everybody out there, nonprofits are not struggling to keep the bills up to date. But more importantly, we want to create content on Stay Curious and our Facebook page so we can monetize our program in a way that will sustain things that we need to do here at the museum. So come a long way to do that, my friends. So thank you very much.
Sir. Thanks for putting up with me.
Well, thank you for your generosity of your time, and there'll be some hugs waiting for you, I'm sure, outside the door there. And men and women lining up for hugs. You got to ask for them first, Terry says. So thank you so much, my friend, and we hope that you all come back to Stay Curious tomorrow when we have Jean Wright. Let me put that up there. Our schedule for tomorrow. There's Jean Wright up there. I'm looking forward to her presentation as the shuttle seamstress and other stories that she has. We'll talk to her about her involvement in the space community, and she and Ken Kramer, her partner, have been traveling around the country for the last couple years and done a couple cruises, and really are a good barometer to how the American, Joe and Jane America, I call them out there, perceive our shuttle era as well as our whole space program. So come back to us Thursday and Friday. Until next time, I'm Mark Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.